I want to share with you something this morning that has nothing to do with the sermon. I just need to share it with you. What happens in our family business is change happens overnight. And when something happens and someone calls you, you go right away, the same way that you would do in ministry. And it happened last evening, and usually what happens is when Tracy's gone at the Indianapolis or the IRL, Ryan has to leave, but he can't leave the girls. So usually it's Gina that goes and stays with the girls, and so Ryan and I can go and take care of things. Well, it all happened last night that Gina couldn't be involved in it, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I told Ryan I'll stay with the girls, and you go to the hospital. And I said, okay, that'd be great. So here I am. I'm with the girls, and we're staying up later. It's on Facebook. Oh, sorry. Ryan told me not to keep them up late, but we stayed up late. And there's this big, huge couch that Ryan has, and we're sitting on that, and we're all covered up. And I got both my girls, and we're watching the Disney Channel, which, by the way, the Disney Channel is not the Disney we used to know, okay? But anyway, we're watching the Disney Channel, and it's one of those moments, you know them, that is a godly moment in which everybody's listening and everybody's on the same page. They don't happen very often like this, but we're all covered up. And my oldest one says, just as proud and loving as she could be, I love you, Gaga. Crushed. Now my pragmatic little Maddie is leaning over to me. She says, yeah, we need to do this more often. Go to the refrigerator, get anything you want. Dad will be back up at 2 o'clock. They'll never know. This morning, boy, did I hear about it. I gave them all the candy they wanted, Sprite and everything. They were hiring a kite when they got up this morning, and my son was thrilled with me. He says, next time send Mom no matter what. Those special moments in which they don't come. You're so busy in life, and we're so busy talking. We're so busy about making a living. We're so busy about raising kids. We're so busy to make sure that they get to practice. We're so busy that we make their games. We're so busy cooking. We're so busy with relationships. We're so busy, with church, that we lose those magic moments. Sometimes it comes to a point in which God has to pull the rug out from under you to get you to hear Him. Sometimes it's the kind of thing in which change is only going to occur when you are knocked down a peg or two. Sometimes it's the kind of thing in which it comes out of nowhere. As I get older, am seeing those moments more and more because I'm not the same person that I was. I'm growing, becoming sanctified. And I'm finding in myself it's the little things in life. But it's always been my wonderful thought process to sit down and to talk with people who have had an immediate conversion. How they could be one way 1 minute, and God touches them, and they're 180 degrees the next minute. I mean, I love that story. I had told you many times about Bruce Seward's story, about God touching him, knocking him to the floor in the shower. And his wife came in, and he hit the floor, and she goes, Bruce, are you okay? What's wrong with you? And he says, I just got saved. I remember that. And Peggy said, well, put a towel on. Getting saved. I wonder if we really understand and get an understanding at all of what that means. A life-changing event in which you were something before, but you're something completely opposite of what you were. Maybe it's the kind of thing that you were a really good person. And I've said this many times to you all. There's going to be a lot of good people in hell. But radically changed. I only say that to you today, and the message that we're going to, scripture we're going to have today is that's the only thing that I see that can change the world now. I used to think changing offices and changing voting patterns, getting the right person in office, making sure that we vote for the right people will make a difference. And I'm finding out greatly as time goes on, there's just not a lot of difference in the hatred and the anger as we see out there today. And the only thing that can fix it, the only thing that can change it is Jesus. Is Jesus. And the majority of people are not looking for Jesus. The majority of people are skipping right over this Facebook page and going to YouTube and watching something that's going to make them laugh. Something that's going to be fun. When the real understanding is, without Jesus, there is no life. I understand prophecy and I understand the book of Revelation and I understand the things that are happening in this world and how much of it is coming into fruition. But the challenge to me is, really deep, is the church is changing too much. We're becoming more on one side or the other instead of loving the way Jesus would want us to love. I am in awe, Kevin, when I find a friend who I went to college with or even in high school who was an absolute jerk. And they come and they tell you about their walk with Jesus Christ and that they've been saved. And here's what I find out. I think in my mind, Jenny, it's just crazy to me. How did you do that? Everybody in their mind talked to you before and tried to love you, but you were an absolute cynical jerk. What changed you? How could you do that? Did you take a drug? Did you go to the doctor? What made you fulfilled? What made you have joy in the middle of the ugliness of how you live and how you were? And the answer is every time, Jesus. So the greatest power and the greatest power for change in the world is not going to come from Washington, D.C. It is not going to come from municipalities or who you elect. It is going to come from a change of heart, a change of mind. And the greatest power in the world is the love of God. Amen. Go with me if you've heard this story very many times. In the book of Acts. And it's a wonderful story, but it's the kind of thing that you have to wonder, if that can happen then, there is still hope for us and our country and our leadership and me now. Amen. Saul was the worst possible person you could ever think of. Saul was the kind of person who had no value in human life. Instead of giving life, he would love to take it. And he lived for the adoration. And he lived for the power of what the hierarchy gave him. He killed men, women, and children. He killed them. You will read in a lot of the books that go alongside this in your studies that he just didn't kill them. He butchered them. And I think to myself, of all the people in the world who needed change at that time of life, was a man called Saul. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against his Lord's disciples. Stop. There we are. That's today. Put something up about Jesus on Facebook, and you're either going to get hammered by somebody who is a believer, or Facebook will take it down. I'm just kidding. If you're watching on Facebook, any of you out there, wherever you are, hang on, don't take this down, okay? Breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. Time and time again, as we move through life, we're seeing right now the threats and the murderous desires against God's people is on its way. He went to ask the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. Do you understand what they're saying? He went right in to the high priest and asked for the names of people who are Christians, who are following Jesus. And he is going to fully follow through and find those names and grab them and either kill them or put them in jail. The verbal usage of these passages is so much of where we are today in many ways. And so here's a guy, people knew who he was, they avoided him. Absolutely the worst possible Hitlerist kind of person you would ever find. Saul. You think you're bad. You think your sins are awful. You think the things that you've done in life are murderous sins against other people or against God. Yeah, you probably are right, but this guy has got you topped off. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He's walking along on his way to rain havoc, to rain hell on the disciples. And he's struck down by a voice from heaven. "Saul, why do you persecute me?" And look what his answer is. "Who are you, Lord?" You don't call anybody Lord if you don't have a feeling of understanding who it must be. Throughout all of this, he probably had understood of what Jesus had been saying, what these people have been praying for, what they stood for, and the challenges that they're facing, but he went away from that. But he calls him Lord. "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting," he replied. Some of us today would be saying, well, what I'm doing is not persecuting God by any means. I'm persecuting the people here on earth. When you persecute the church and you persecute the Christians, you persecute the pastors, you persecute those who are of the way, you are persecuting Jesus. He replied, "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. Why not? They heard the sound, but they didn't see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus, and for 3 days he was blind and did not drink or eat anything. We go on to the story knowing how this ends. The scales come off, He meets a man who is predestined to be able to talk to God and to meet him and to tell Saul what he is to do. This plan of God is amazing to me. But the scales came off, and he became perhaps the greatest apostle that we've ever known. Sharing that with you, I just want you to see this. In many ways, you have to understand God knows the timing of when to come into our lives and when to talk to you. It's His timing. Sometimes it could be in a shower. Sometimes it could be riding down the road. Sometimes it's when you see a rainbow. Sometimes it's walking down the road with murderous thoughts in your head. I just want to share with you, how could someone change 180 degrees like that? Here's what I'm seeing. You have to understand, this was not a partial change. This was not something that he was different. He was radically changed. It's not like this. I go out this door and I come back different. No, I'm the same thing. I just took my coat off. There's something different about you. I'm still the same person. In Saul's life, his name changed, and it was a new person that came through that door. Completely new person. I just can't get over the challenges that we face in daily walk with God. And we find ourselves so caught up with the idea that we cannot see that changes can be made. The changes are from Him. See, there's not a partial saving here, is there? He doesn't change your feet. He doesn't change the way that you walk. He doesn't change the way that you eat. He doesn't change the way that you live. He changes everything. Everything. You are a new person. He is no longer Saul. He is Paul. And he is given the authority of Jesus Christ to go out, preach, and to lift up people. See, the world's not going to change by me and Sandy going out there and loving people. What's going to change is that we show Jesus to them. And it's not up to us whether or not they're changed or not. The Lord is the one who will change it. Amen. This is what happens when you're married 43 years. You know exactly when your medication is making you... Thank you, dear. I've had too many people, Archie. Thank you, Gina. I've met too many people in my life, you've met them too, that go out this door and come back like I did. I left my coat. You see, I'm still the same person. I'm just dressed differently. How many people have come to the altar and gave their life, quote, to Jesus Christ? They come back. Sometimes they go back and get their coat. I am talking about a transformation of love and relationship that only Jesus Christ can give. John and I are good friends. I hurt John's feelings. He hurts my feelings. If that's it, we're not going to get into a battering back and forth because we're friends. But we're human. And I promise, I could probably do something that would tick him off the rest of his life and vice versa. But with Jesus, He changes everything. He changes everything. He makes it so that when you go to a funeral, you can give your life to Jesus Christ at a funeral, and the Joe Bartel that came to the funeral is no longer the Joe Bartel that leaves the funeral and immediately is looking for a church. The changes that come in this transformation of Paul is the most important radical weapon that we have in this world. You cannot shoot people into submission. You cannot shoot people into believing the way that you want them to live. And you cannot radicalize to the point of your point is greater than my point, and so you're not worth it. The only thing that is going to change this world is the radical, saving belief in Jesus. You gotta hear me on this. We're getting ready to vote, and I was telling Ryan, in many ways, there are things, yeah, I'm going to vote. Yeah, I know who I'm going to vote for, and I know the policies. But I tell you, either way, there's still going to be riots. There's still going to be hate. There's still going to be this judgmental factor, whoever gets elected. So the point must be for us to understand this radical change that only comes from Jesus Christ. The only way it's going to change is sharing the love of God. I've told you many times that we would go to things with our youth group years ago, and we would go, and it was not the idea that we would go to these things and kids would come to the altar. They came to the altar because every other kid went to the altar. They came to the altar because emotion played a role in things. They came to the altar because that's what you did in youth group. But when you're radically changed, you are changed forever. It's not like not drinking coffee in the morning anymore. It's not like putting down the cigarettes. You know, I know a lot of loving, God-fearing people that smoke. That's between them and God. I seldom have found too many drunkards who have given their life to Jesus Christ and have quit drinking. It's important to understand what this radical change is. My point would be today, we are making a huge, huge transformation of the physical structure of this building. I used to lie awake at night and how is this going to come to fruition? I want to tell you, Andy, I was freaking out how we're going to unload those chairs. Because here's what I thought. I'm going to be there wearing a back brace with duct tape on it, and I'm going to sneak out of the house so Gina doesn't know I'm here. And I'm going to watch you guys, or I'm going to throw my back out, and you and Ryan will be there. Only reason Ryan was there because I forced him to be there. And it's you. 3 guys, 250 chairs. You didn't realize this. There was 25 of us here. And I just sat back and I thought it wasn't about the change of the chairs. It just wasn't about the change of the chairs. It's about the idea of the spirit that has been caught in Andy has bled over to everybody else. And the people that were there, Alex, Austin was there. They were all there helping and taking the chairs off. Oh my gosh. Who would ever thought we'd have a forklift to do so much of that? And I came away, yes, the chairs were beautiful, but the Spirit of God was more than overwhelming for me. We can have an absolutely gorgeous interior of a church, but if your hearts are not changed, if you are not saved, nothing matters. Nothing matters. We're doing the right things here. We're living on the edge. But what we also have to do is to make sure each one of us has seen the light of Jesus and has allowed that light to come in. You cannot be lukewarm in a church. You can't say you've changed and take off your coat and say that you're different. All you are is the same person. You just gave a little to him. You got to give it all. You got to give it all. So here's what happens. the worst possible sinner that I could think of in the Bible. Oh, there's many of them. He was killing Christians. You know, the rioters and the challenges of all the things that are going on with Black Lives Matter and Green Lives Matter and Purple Lives, all of this stuff, I understand it, and I do, but killing has to stop. And the value of life has to become more important. What has happened is, when you give your life to Christ, your thought process changes all the time. What was important is no longer important. And your loving the way that you love is changed forever. I love talking to farmers. When you're putting out acreage, you get to watch and you got to see the seed planted, and you take care of it, and it slowly grows into something great. But they don't grow unless there's roots. And without the roots, there's no nutrients. There's no stability. Some of us are the farmer that scatters his seed between the rocks, knowing full well that it's not going to happen. Some of us are those who plant, but we don't take care of it. We don't pull the weeds of our lives, and we don't give up our leaves of our lives. We think that it's all going to be manicured for us. The farmer that plants deep into fertile ground receives a harvest tenfold, according to the Bible. Are we that today? I just want you to think about that today. Are you saved? I would say the majority of you probably are. But have you just taken your coat off? Have you just given part of your life to Him? Have you just said, well, I'll give you this, but Lord, you can't have this? I want you to be saved. So I want to ask you if you would stand with me. Praise team, get up here, but don't sing yet. I want you to stand with me. And I want you to truly search your heart. To ask yourself, am I saved? Is it the kind of thing that you can say, well, I think I am? Radical transformation of Paul. It's huge. It's a story that we can all relate to. And maybe there's something you're hanging on to that you can't get rid of, or you don't want to get rid of. I'm tired of this church thing. Just going to walk away. There's some of you on Facebook right now that are asking the same question. You're all caught up with Republicans and Democrats. You're all caught up with riots and hate. You're all caught up with who should wear a mask, who shouldn't. You're all caught up with social distancing. It is driving you insane. It's time to let go and let God have it. It is time right now for you on Facebook who's watching this today to give it all. You want change? Radical change? Let's not make America great again. Let's make Jesus the greatest thing that's ever been in our lives. Amen. And if we do that, that is the snowball effect in which we all will see Jesus change the world. Are you saved? Is the example of me going out that door you today? Or is the example in your life Saul going out that door and coming back Paul? Everything is changed forever. America is no different than those in China who are giving their lives to Jesus Christ in the basements of people who are hiding them so they can worship. The challenge that we have is, in America, we take off our coat and we think we've changed. We take our coat and we give it to Jesus. He wants everything. And if there is one person here that can't say today without a shadow of a doubt that if Jesus comes this afternoon, you won't be with him, you need to come. If you don't know him, I want you to come. For those of you who don't want to, I totally agree, totally understand. But life's not going to get easier after the pandemic. I'm not sure what after the pandemic even is. What I do know is radical change must occur to each one of us, to each church, and to everyone. That's where everything changes for us. You're not red or you're not blue. You're not green. You're not a different color. You're God's. And when you have that, watch the peace that comes over you. I don't know how I would handle the next 3 months without Jesus in my life. I don't know how you do it. Today's the day. And I want you right there, if you want to come and pray with me, I'll be honored to pray. If you want to just stay in your seats and you work this out and you talk to God, I'm going to give you 1 full minute by yourselves, you and Jesus, and you talk. If you find yourself holding on to the chair in front of you and you feel like you're being pulled, let go. You're hanging on to my coat. You're hanging on to that something that you don't need anymore. He's telling you, I want you. Give it to me today. Let's take 1 minute. If you'd like to come, if you'd like to pray, however it is, 1 minute. Whatever you've done in your pew, whatever you've talked with God, the one thing that you can see is that you've seen the light. You've seen it, you're embracing it, and you're right in the middle of it. I'm fascinated as I work with the situation of my job as a funeral director and dealing with death. And I've read every book. There's a book called Life After Life. And it talks about all of the things that people see on their deathbed. And it talks about it. And the one thing that they can, and you could play on this, you could talk about it, you can say, oh my goodness, it has nothing scripturally to do with anything. The one thing that it keeps saying in every one of these documented life after death situations is they saw a light. And that light was calming. I don't know. If you think it's a neurological response, so be it. But the calming nature just makes sense to me that light is God. Have you seen the light today? I think you have. And if you have, we need to sing this to the tops of our lungs today. Sing it with me, Colette.